Hi, this is my new video about photography shop, so enjoy. You probably don't remember those strange little rooms where people used to get 3x4 photographs taken. If you're under 30, you might not have even seen one. I never would have imagined that the scariest story I ever heard would have anything to do with a place like that. 2 weeks ago, a few of us went to a sauna, like we usually did. Very normally about 5 of us. We'd all been friends since school. The conversation had become pretty predictable over years. Most of the time, we were just pretending to socialize, drinking until we were tired enough to go home. That was about the level of our friendship. So bringing someone from outside the usual group was not unusual. That night we were telling the usual stories, nothing special. As the evening dragged on, some people fell asleep, overslept, and the few of us who were still awake reached that strange stage of being too drunk to think clearly, but somehow too sober to pass out. Every few years, somehow, the conversation would turn toward the supernatural, and sometime around 3 in the morning, with two of my old friends and a guy I'd invited along, that's exactly what happened. Dima, one of my friends from school, told us about in a dark silhouette in his rearview mirror a couple of times while transporting cars from Latvia. Kalyan, another friend, told us about finding needles stuck in his door and visiting some woman who claimed she could deal with things like that. I did not have a story of my own, but then I remembered Sasha. He was the guy I'd invited that night. We had studied together at a technical college, and for the last couple of years, we'd been seeing each other almost every day because our stalls at the market were next to each other. He sold electronics. I sold household supplies. On Fridays, we drink beer with the overs and then head to the sauna. I suddenly remembered something Sasha had told me years ago. Back in the college, he had worked as a photographer. His whole family had been involved in photography since the late Soviet era. Cameras, film, development photographs, that kind of thing. He wasn't exactly the center of attention at college. We mostly exchanged game discs and talking when we happened to be around each other. He told me the story during our final year while we were smoking outside. At the time, he'd been working for his father in a small photography shop next to a passport office. The place was old. There was a narrow hallway with worn benches that looked like they had been there forever. At the end of the hallway was a small ticket booth, next to a little stationery store, and beside that store was Sasha's workplace. The sign above the door said, Express Photo. It was exactly what you expect. 3x4 photographs for a passport and other documents. Regular photographs cost 5 rubles and were ready the next day. For 15 rubles, you can get the express service. Sasha would process the photographs in Photoshop and have them ready in about half an hour. He worked there 5 days a week, from 9 in the morning until 6. Most of his customers just needed passport photos. There were other things too, printing pictures on mugs, t-shirts, and the other small items. But the passport photographs were eventually made him it. It was 2008. Maybe other places already had better equipment, but that particular shop still had a huge Canon camera mounted on tripod in the middle of the room. A long cable ran from it to the computer. In front of the camera was a small stool. Behind it was a white backdrop. You'd come in, hang your jacket on a rack, check yourself in the mirror, fix your hair, sit down, and wait. Sasha would tell you where to look and how to tilt your head. The camera was pretty good for the time, but it still had its limitation. If someone moving even slightly, the photo could come out blurry. Sometimes Sasha had to wait almost a minute to get a clean shot. That's when he saw something that terrified him. A woman in her 50s came into the shop. She looked completely ordinary. There was nothing strange about her appearance. No unusual clothes, no strange behavior, nothing. 15 rubles. Express photo, please. Of course, you can leave your code there. The mirror is right here. Have a seat. The woman sat down. Sasha asked her to raise her chin slightly and straighten her shoulders. When he stepped behind the camera, he tried to focus. The camera would not lock on. He waited. The woman became increasingly impatient. How much longer? A few seconds passed. How much longer? She shifted slightly in her seat. When she coughed, her breathing became heavy. Sasha assumed she was simply in a hurry. When the camera finally focused, he looked at the little screen and froze. The woman's face looked different. Not dramatically different. That was the worst part. Her lips were slightly raised, almost as she was trying to suppress a smile. The muscle around her cheeks tightened. Her eyes seemed unnaturally fixed on the lens, and then, for a fraction of a second, her expression changed. Something about her face seemed completely wrong. Then it was all gone. Sasha blinked. The woman was sitting very normally again. A few seconds later, it happened again, and disappeared just as quickly. Sasha could only watch her through the tiny screen. Normally, tried not to touch the camera once everything had been adjusted. He used the small button on the cable to take the pictures, but this time he instinctively reached over the camera, almost as if he could hide behind it. He quickly took several dozen photos. When he told the woman to come back in half an hour, as soon as she left, he stepped away from the camera. He opened the photos on the computer. Every picture showed the same woman, but in every photo there was something slightly wrong with her expression. Her eyes looked too focused. Her lips seemed to be holding back a different expression. Her face looked as if trying to become something else, as if the woman were concentrating very hard on looking normal. Sasha chose the 4 least disturbing photos and printing them. She never came back. Not after half an hour. Not the next day. Not ever. Sasha was frightened enough to ask his parents if he could quit. They refused. They told him he was overreacting and needed to stop being dramatic. So he stayed. Eventually, he convinced himself that the woman simply had some kind of mental problem. After a couple of weeks, he almost stopped thinking about it, when something similar happened again. This time it was an elderly man. The camera refused to focus on him. The man sat perfectly still. Sasha asking him several times not to move. The longer the man stared directly into the lens, the stranger his expression became. First, there was a faint smile. Then his eyes widened, his eyebrows rose, his lips tightened. Sasha stared at the screen. It was the same thing, the same unnatural change. The man didn't say anything. He simply kept looking at the camera. Sasha was too frightened to care about getting a perfect photo. He just pressed the button again and again. The man never came back with the pictures either. Sasha gave them in small green Kodak paper envelopes inside his desk, one on top of another. Didn't like having them nearby. Sometimes he would move them onto a cabinet near the entrance, as far away from himself as possible. There was something wrong with them, something that didn't feel human. There were no monster in the photo, no obvious supernatural details, just people. And yet, looking at their faces made Sasha feel as they were hiding something they weren't supposed to show. For an entire month, ordinary people came and went. When one day, a woman arrived with her young daughter. The girl kept moving around on the stool. Her mother kept telling her to sit still, fixing her hair and adjusting her clothes. Sasha waited for the right moment. When something caught his attention, he looked at the girl's mother. She was standing behind the stool, completely still, and stared directly into the camera. Her face slowly began to change, not suddenly, not like something from a horror movie. It was much more subtle than that. Her expression simply became less and less natural, as though she had forgotten how a normal person was supposed to look. Sasha stared at the little screen when he looked at the girl. The girl had become completely still. Her head was tilted backward slightly. Her mouth was open. Her eyes were turned upward as she was looking at something above the camera. Sasha had tightened around the shutter button. He took several pictures. When he stepped away from the camera, that incident finally broke him. He left the job. It was our final year at the technical college. That's when he told me the first part of the story. But there was another part. The part that happened afterward, after we moved to different cities. After Sasha failed to build the life he had imagined and eventually returned to work with his father. 3 years later, he found himself back in the same photography shop, as press photo, and the same thing started happening again. He told me this year later, sitting with us in the sauna. "I will tell you something right away," Sasha said, taking a long drink of beer. "I believe in everything. Demons, ghosts, curses, love spells, fortune tellers, all of it. So don't waste your time trying to convince me that what happened was impossible." He paused. "Just accept that it exists. It would be easier for me if it were all made up." He looked around the room. "If you want, I will show you some of the photos at the end." When he continued, when Sasha returned to the old shop, some of the familiar customers eventually started coming back, and he began seeing the same thing through the little camera screen. Their faces would change, sometimes only for a second, sometimes for much longer. A strange smile, a tightened jaw, eyes that seemed to light, a face that suddenly looked unfamiliar. We never attacked him. We never tried to hurt him. We simply behaved strangely, and that frightened Sasha. Most was that there was no pattern. Young woman, old man, middle-aged workers, teenagers, people from completely different backgrounds. Anyone could do it. The longer we stared into the lens, the more obvious change became. For the first few seconds, nothing happened. But if we continued staring for close to a minute, something about them began to change. It was as if they were slowly recognizing something in the camera, something about themselves. Some of them seemed frightened, others seemed strangely fascinating, and a few appeared almost calm, as if they were finally seeing something they had been trying not to notice. Sasha did not know how it worked, but he began to think that perhaps the camera wasn't showing them their reflections. Maybe it was showing them what was hiding underneath it. He started experimenting. The first experiments seemed harmless. A woman sat in front of the camera for several minutes. Her expression gradually became blank, her skin looked unusually pale beneath the Florence whites. Her features seemed almost lifeless. Sasha took the photo. She never came back for it. The second time, he tried it with a large man. He kept the man in front of the camera for almost 2 minutes. The man's expression slowly became strange. His eyes drifted apart, his head tilted downward, his lips formed a faint, innocent smile. When he suddenly became short of breath and began laughing nervously. He slipped from the stool and ended up sitting on the floor. Sasha called an ambulance. The man looked up at him. His expression had become completely unfamiliar. When he slowly raised one finger and pointed at Sasha, he didn't say anything. He just kept pointing. Sasha never forgot that moment. What should have been enough to make him stop? It wasn't. He continued his experiments. He kept people in front of the camera longer and longer. They would sit there quietly while their expression changed. Sometimes they looked frightened, sometimes confused, sometimes almost peaceful. Eventually, Sasha reached 5 minutes, and then something happened that frightened him more than anything before it. When he printed the photo, there was nothing there. 4 completely empty squares. No person, no background, nothing. Sasha tried to explain it to us. You know what's supposed to be the scariest thing for a demon? He leaned closer. Its name. He smiled slightly. It's such a cliché, but you almost laugh when you see it in the movies. Tell me your name. Your name. He took another drink, but I realized something else. For something like that, maybe there is nothing worse than being photographed. Think about it. People have only been taking photos for a tiny fraction of human history. They couldn't possibly have evolved some instinctive fear of cameras. Yet, some people see a camera and immediately become uncomfortable. He looked at us. Maybe that's not fear of the camera. Maybe it is fear of being seen. Dima laughed. That's it. You keep photographing them, and now you got the empty pictures. Sasha shook his head. Not exactly. Then he continued. After the photos disappeared, Sasha could not shake the feeling that he had missed something. There was something hiding in those expressions, something important. He still had a collection of photos of people who had stayed in front of the camera for less than 5 minutes. Every day he would look for them over and over, trying to find some connection, some pattern. But there wasn't one. Every face was different. Every expression was unique. The more he looked at them, the stranger something else became. He started catching himself making the same expressions. At first, it was accidental. His mouth would move strangely. He would tense one side of his face. He would imitate an expression from one of the photos without even realizing it. When he started doing it deliberately, he would sit in front of a mirror and try to reproduce the expression. Sometimes it took several attempts. Eventually, he became very good at it. A week passed, and one day Sasha realized something about what frightened him. He liked doing it. He could not explain why. He simply enjoys standing in front of a mirror and making those expressions. It's become a daily habit when he starts photographing himself, using the same camera, the same cable, the same button. He would sit in front of the lens for 5 minutes, then 10, sometimes longer. When Sasha told us this part, I noticed something strange. His voice hadn't changed. He was not joking. He was not trying to make the story sound more frightening. He was completely serious. By then, even Dima had stopped making jokes. It was almost 4 in the morning. I wanted to go home. The conversation had taken a turn I didn't like. When Sasha finally reached the photos, Dima kept asking him whenever he was going to show us the pictures. He tried to make jokes about demons. He kept waking Kalyan up and dragging him back into the conversation. The story should have ended with Sasha telling us that he did not have the photos anymore. Instead, he stood up. He reached into his jeans and pulled out his wallet. Inside was a small glossy photos. He handed it to Dima. From where I was sitting, I could see 4 identical squares. Dima stared at the pictures. When he looked at Sasha, "That's you?" Sasha did not answer. Dima looked at the photo again. Wait. He leaned closer. "But that's you?" He looked back at Sasha. "How?" His voice became quieter. "How did you?" Then he slowly began copying the expression on it. He pushed his jaw forward slightly, tensed his cheeks, raised his eyebrows. "I don't understand," he whispered. He kept staring at the photo. Then he stood up and walked toward the mirror. He looked at the picture, then at his reflection, then back at the picture, and started copying the expression again. Something about the way he did it made me uncomfortable. I began getting dressed. I did not want to watch. The image in my mind kept changing. One strange face after another, hundreds of them. When I realized the sound I was hearing weren't in my head, Dima was shouting. He had grabbed his head and was crying out, completely overwhelmed. His eyes were wide with panic. He tried to speak, but could not seem to get the words out. His face had changed. His jaw was pushed forward unnaturally, making his features look completely unfamiliar. He kept looking at me. His expression seems to say the same thing over and over. "Help me." The sleepy, confused Kalyan finally woke up. For once, he didn't make a joke. He immediately realized that something was wrong and called an ambulance. The sauna attendant came in a moment later. She looked at Dima. Then she crossed herself and simply stood there. The ambulance arrived. Dima was taken away. Later, he could not remember what had happened. Neither could Kalyan. And Sasha was gone. Completely gone. What frightened me most was not even that. The next morning, I went to the market. Sasha's electronic store was gone. There was only an empty counter with a faded sign that said, "For rent." I stood there for a long time. I asked people nearby where Sasha had gone. Nobody knew who I was talking about. Some of them said there had never been an electronic store there. That's when I started thinking about the old photography shop, the place was still there, across the street from the passport office. I went there that afternoon. The hallway looked almost exactly as I remembered it from Sasha's stories. The old benches were gone. There were three worn office chairs instead. The ticket booth had become a beer counter. The stationery store was now a woman's clothing shop, but the photography shop was still there. Express photo. The metal door was closed. It looked as nobody had used it in years. There was still a display rack beside it. The glass was dusty. The old 3x4 photos were almost completely faded. I stepped closer, and when I saw him, I recognized Sasha immediately. He was standing there, among the old photos, looking straight ahead, his nose slightly raised, his jaw just a little too far forward, his eyebrows lifted. There was something strange about his expression, something I couldn't explain. Someone had written small names beside the photos a very long time ago. Most of them were almost impossible to read. But beside his photo, one word was still visible. Sasha. I stood there, looking at his face for a long time, and the stranger thing was, I could not figure out what was wrong with his expression, but the longer I looked at it, the more familiar it seemed.
I like it because it's not usual creepy horror story, it's something different. So I hope you like it too.